Over 9 seasons and counting, Shark Tank has become one of the most popular shows on television and helped make the dreams of countless business owners come true. The show's panel of investor sharks recently celebrated $100 million invested over the show's run, and those dollars have helped to bring us some useful, innovative, and fun products. But of course, not every pitch can be a winner. Some contestants who have failed to secure a deal on the show have gone on to success on their own. But for every one of those, there are a half dozen others that never stood a chance. Today we'll be taking a look at the most ridiculous, ill-conceived, flat-out worst Shark Tank pitches ever. Darren Johnson came into the tank on the show's pilot episode with what may have been the worst pitch anybody has ever heard. In order to remedy the annoying problem of Bluetooth headsets which can fall out of your ear, Johnson proposed a new device, the Ionic Ear, which was simply a Bluetooth device which could be implanted surgically into the user's neck below the ear. The sharks began dropping like flies the more Johnson attempted to explain his vision. And once he was done, Barbara Corcoran asked him to explain the whole thing again for the sake of clarity. In other words, to make clear that he was crazy. Damon John called the idea disturbing, and Hurjevic seemed particularly creeped out that the device would require the user to basically stick a needle-shaped charger into their ears at night to charge it, not to mention that additional surgeries would be required to upgrade it. On Shark Tank's retrospective 100th episode, Corcoran singled out the Ionic Ear as being the worst pitch she could remember, and none of the other sharks could disagree. Amanda and Jason Adams pitched their product in Season 5, one which they were sure would help couples everywhere to work out their problems. Elephant Chat was simply a small stuffed elephant inside a clear box with a steel cover. Whenever a partner had an issue they needed to talk about, they could simply remove the cover to expose the elephant in the room, letting their significant other know that they needed to talk. It might seem like a cutesy idea, and it did give the sharks a laugh. That is, until the Adamses revealed their production cost of $22 per unit and retail price point of $59. Alarmingly, the couple also pointed out that they had plenty of inventory, because they had already managed to raise $100,000 in capital from several friends, prompting O'Leary to crack while stifling laughter that they wouldn't have these friends much longer. The rest of the sharks took turns pointing out to the very nice couple that charging $60 for a $3 stuffed animal just wasn't going to work no matter how you cut it. And Elephant Chat went down in Shark Tank history as one of the most stunningly bad ideas the panel had ever heard, but not the very worst. They'd gotten that one out of the way early, in the very first episode of Shark Tank. Mary Ellen Simonson's Season 1 pitch was doomed from the start. Into the Shark Tank, she brought a product with no sales, no demand, and no purpose. Basically, a giant oversized sticky note that holds more sticky notes. Insisting that this would revolutionize sticky note storage for those who work at their laptops, she immediately drew the pointed sarcasm of O'Leary, who gushed that she should keep this brilliant idea a secret before putting his poker face back on and dropping out. The remaining sharks desperately tried to get Simonson to convince them why this wasn't a total waste of time, to which she could only respond with canned statistics about yearly laptop sales in the US. Despite the hostile response, Barbara Corcoran, while not going so far as to make an offer, at least offered encouragement by saying that she liked Simonson and thought that just maybe she had a viable product. Hurjevic quickly scolded her for this, saying that just this type of encouragement from family and friends was probably exactly why Simonson had dragged this terrible idea for a product onto national television. Sharks don't often find themselves asking if a contestant is literally insane, but not every contestant can be Mark Sullivan. The self-described inventor with over 1,000 alleged inventions to his credit dropped by in Season 3 to offer the sharks a chance to get in on a fascinating new technology, his Sullivan generator, which he describes as harvesting energy from the rotation of the Earth. For a brief moment, he appears to have the sharks' attention, before going completely off the rails with his pitch. Sullivan described how his device sucks in and vaporizes salt water from the ocean, and then, in his words, the water vapor is delivered to a vortex chamber, where the Coriolis effect spins this into a hurricane, which drives the turbines, which makes electricity. He went on to describe the waste products, mineral precipitate, manganese, and gold. Robert Hurjevic wryly summed up the idea they were being pitched. We suck water in, we make it spin really fast, and we produce electricity on one hand and gold bars on the other. Rather than shying away from the blinding sarcasm, Sullivan doubled down by saying the waste products can be $96 billion in gold, without saying exactly how he arrived at that incredibly specific figure. He concludes by laying out his plan to build 200 of his generators all over the planet, to which Kevin O'Leary promptly asks how long Sullivan will be visiting Earth. The master inventor went on to list some of his inventions, including an artificial heart, and to claim that he also makes money from writing music and sewing handbags. Damon John quite seriously asks Sullivan if anyone had ever told him he's crazy, to which Sullivan could only reply that he doesn't drink or do drugs. O'Leary's retort of "I'm thinking maybe you should" effectively ended the cringe-inducing pitch. Inventor Jason Woods actually brought an interesting product to his Season 5 pitch, the Chimera Bodyboard, a fully electric bodyboard that anybody could ride over the waves with ease. He brought along his cute fiancée, a slick-looking prototype, and a fun demonstration video. But he forgot to bring one thing: a business plan of any kind. The Sharks were riveted by the presentation until Jason began to talk numbers, because the numbers were, in a word, non-existent. Jason had not been granted a patent, had never sold a single bodyboard, and over the years he had sunk over $130,000 of his own money into prototypes. Despite having no cash flow, he was seeking a whopping $250,000 investment for a 25% stake, a valuation of well over $1 million which he could in no way justify. While most of the Sharks politely bowed out, Cuban and John were utterly scornful, with Cuban calling the inventor full of crap and John proclaiming it the worst pitch he had ever seen on the show, although it seems likely that in his anger a previous pitch or two had escaped his mind. New parents Ivan Barnes and Lisa Evans thought they had the next hot parenting product on their hands when they dove into the tank during Season 5. Called Squeaky Knees, it consisted of a pair of squeaky pads sewn into the knees of toddlers' pants, which both provides padding and alerts parents to their children's whereabouts at all times. It might seem like kind of a good idea at first, until you think about it for about 5 seconds. That's roughly how long it took for Herjavec to realize and point out that it would take no time at all for the constant, incessant squeaking to become incredibly annoying. Ivan brushed aside the criticism by saying he found the idea endearing. But when Lori Greiner turned the talk to numbers, things got worse. After 3 long years in business, the couple had managed sales of only about 500 units, amounting to a paltry $10,000. They attempted to defend themselves by explaining that they were full-time parents with no marketing background, which didn't do them any favors with the Sharks, and prompted O'Leary to speculate that perhaps they hadn't reached their sales goals because their products sucked. The Sharks dropped out quickly, with only Damon John remaining to the end of the pitch, but the couple's argumentative nature and poor defense of their business strategy ultimately caused him to bail as well. Ryan Custer is a man who really likes the term cougar, as it is sometimes applied to sexy older women. Enough so that he fancied himself able to build a lifestyle brand out of it, which he brought in front of the Sharks in Season 3. His golden idea? An energy drink, or lifestyle shot branded Cougar Energy, and marketed to women over 30. As you might expect, it took less than a minute for his pitch to begin drawing the ire of the Sharks. Seeking $150,000 for 30% of his company, Custer tried and failed to convince the panel that the concept of cougars constituted a huge social movement, as evidenced by things like the television show Cougar Town, and the fact that cougar is a phrase that exists. Supremely unconvinced by his pitch, the Sharks weren't any more inclined to throw money at Custer after tasting the stuff, which Corcoran proclaimed tasted like chalk, and learning of the paltry sales of about $60,000 which Custer had managed over 3 years. O'Leary pointed out that excluding men from an energy drink product made no sense, and excluding women under 30 made even less. And Herjavec brought down the hammer by wondering if the product wouldn't make women feel old, and labeling it a gag gift. It could be that the entire concept of cougars just isn't setting the world on fire after all. Aaron McDaniel came in with a Season 6 pitch that he was convinced would change the real estate game forever. A crowdfunding platform for real estate investment, which he said would allow small-time investors to get in on hot properties for as little as $1,000. Barely a minute into his pitch, however, everything went awry, as Cuban blurted out, "I hate it," and O'Leary got a little more specific, saying, "I smell jail time." If McDaniel thought he'd be coming away with a deal because so many of the Sharks are experienced real estate investors, he could not have been more wrong. Cuban was unable to hide his disgust throughout the entire pitch, and all of the Sharks began throwing around words like scammy, spooky, and unfair at the thought of online real estate investing with no oversight. Only O'Leary made an offer to completely rebrand the business with his own name and put up the asking price of $50,000 in exchange for 50%, not the 10% McDaniel had been seeking. McDaniel flatly refused, and the Sharks couldn't give him the boot fast enough. Mattiece Allen's pitch sounds halfway decent on its surface. An alarm clock that wakes you up with the smell of cooking bacon, which an informal poll taken by Allen had revealed was the way most people would want to be woken up. The only problem was Allen's design amounted to an actual grill, enclosed in wood, that would actually cook bacon at the prescribed time in the morning. And if you can't see the potential problems with this, the Sharks certainly spotted them all right away. Aside from being an idea whose novelty would wear thin quickly when the smell of bacon grease in your bedroom became permanent, it was pointed out that such a device could potentially be a serious fire hazard, a stumbling block that Allen quite obviously had no idea how to address. Once the pitch reached the number crunching stage, it also became clear that Allen was likely to end up needing far more than the $40,000 he was asking for, and all of the sharks quickly bailed. Once again, O'Leary had the final word, saying, "I'm going to put that in my museum of really bad ideas that kill people." James Lavatola and Brian Pitt came into the tank in Season 4 with a plan: secure $5 million in funding for their full-length action film revolving around the exciting idea of a motorcycle world championship. In order to really knock the sharks dead, they knew they'd need three things: a scantily clad girl, a silent, menacing figure in a black helmet astride a motorcycle, and an exciting trailer for their film. While Mark Cuban bailed on the idea before Pitt could even complete the first sentence of his pitch, the rest of the sharks stuck around, perhaps out of morbid curiosity. They were then treated to the single cheesiest, worst excuse for a movie trailer anybody has ever seen, and the pitch would only get worse. After screening the completely action-free trailer, which pretty much consisted of big blocky catchphrases accompanied by loud sounds, Lavatola tried to salvage the situation by proclaiming Pitt kind of an expert on the subject of movies. Asked to elaborate, Pitt proceeded to stumble mightily over his words, barely sticking to his rehearsed pitch, but managing to reveal that the duo didn't even have a script or any cast or crew attached to the project. Lavatola then jumped back in to educate the sharks on the way films are financed now, which went about as well as you might expect. Pitt managed to rein the pitch back in to an extent by dropping the names of a couple films that had been previously produced by a small indie company he had worked for, but Damon James, as a producer on The Crow, had already seen enough to know these guys had no idea what they were talking about, and they were basically chastised off the stage by the rest of the sharks. Cuban's parting shot that he'd seen a similar deal in a Nigerian email must have hurt worse than any road rash.